Hi everyone, Chris Fong here from the Xoogler community. So glad Joshua So is joining us. I got to know Joshua over the past few years. He's been volunteering, organizing different demo days, organizing different events with the Xoogler community. And he's always had such a great passion about Myanmar. And I met up with him a couple of times to learn more about it. And I wanted to share this opportunity with all the Xoogler communities globally. And I'm going to try to go myself 22 to 29th of December. But hopefully all of you will be passionately hearing what he's about to say and consider going during those dates or other dates. The time at Google, which I've really appreciated, was going to Tanzania, google.org, and Google Reach in India. So this is sort of a little bit of an extension with Xoogler, Xoogler Reach or Xoogler.org, I guess, type of projects. But look, I'm really honored that Joshua is speaking to all of us. He's such a great human being. So Joshua, I'm going to get you to share more about your story of how you first got into being involved in Myanmar, and tell us more about a potential opportunity where people can go visit later this year.
Sure. Nice to meet you, everybody. And my name is Joshua. I'm 100% Singaporean. For those people who have some doubts, my great-grandfather came here about 100 years ago. And yeah, I actually prepared a few slides and videos, but I think since I've heard all of the introductions, most of you are not really super stranger to Myanmar. I think you've either been there before or heard of it. Maybe a bit more about myself before I jump into the presentation proper. Yeah, so my background is a school dropout. I only actually did my formal education until 16 years old. And then I started a couple of businesses, the first of which was a rental company. That was actually what drove me to start a company in Myanmar, because I couldn't find good enough people in Singapore that would stay. And, having a revolving door of people and, freelancers and full-timers led me to want more consistency in the business. So my first foray as an entrepreneur in Myanmar was in 2018, when I set up a small office and had a few staff working remotely for me back in Singapore. And slowly other companies started asking me, since you have an office there, can I also hire some people and park them at your space? And then we became like a co-working space by pure accident, no business plan whatsoever. And then we had more people working for those other companies than my company, and we became a HR company by accident. So we needed to start helping out, manage all of these remote employees and help them with their employee engagement, employee benefits. Yeah, and then of course, everybody knows in 2020, the pandemic happened. That was a huge shock to the system. I think this is where I can start sharing my slides. Where is the... Yeah, so that was the longest time that I've actually stayed in Myanmar. This was my quarantine center on the right here. It was actually a half-built school dormitory, which I had the honor of staying for one entire month. As you can see, that it wasn't even a bed frame, a mattress. They gave us a bed frame, and I brought my computer and all my devices there to continue working. And then after that, I had to come back to Singapore because I didn't have a visa to stay any longer. So I did my 2 weeks quarantine in MBS, the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. That was a huge contrast. But what happened during COVID was that you could no longer run a co-working space because everyone was working from home and everyone was very afraid of the virus. So we had to sort of pivot the entire business model to supporting people from their homes and to organizing, virtual engagements and, learning and development opportunities for our remote team. Yeah, and I guess the next thing I did was to travel quite extensively. So I joined the VC fund for a bit because I couldn't run my media companies. Started traveling across 5 continents, and this was the newspaper article that the local paper in Singapore wrote about me, until I could finally go back to Myanmar. So in 2022, they started issuing visas again, and the country was opened up. But of course, the year before this was also the coup, where the military took over the government, and the Special Administrative Council was formed. However, like you can see in these photos from 2022, people were still out on the streets, cars were still moving on the roads, at least in Yangon and Mandalay. And yeah, life has to go on for these people, and so did our HR company have to continue operating. 2023, we had a team retreat somewhere in the Ayeyarwady region, which is currently suffering from quite heavy floods, as well as a personal trip I took up to Shan State again. I'll be sharing a map of some of the other places in Myanmar that I had visited over the years as well. And yeah, last year I took on a personal, or 2 years ago, I took on a personal challenge to do this 2,000 kilometers cycle from Singapore to Bangkok to raise funds for a clinic along the Myanmar and Thai border called the Maytao Clinic. So they actually provide over 100,000 people who are undocumented workers or migrants with free healthcare and education, so that they can continue getting access to these essential services. Because in the context of undocumented people going into Thailand, they will not have ability to go to a regular hospital or school, where the first thing they will ask for is your ID. And then last year, I think everyone knows that US aid sort of had a huge reduction in scope. So I did another walk for the same clinic and walked 500 kilometers to continue the journey from Bangkok to the border of Thailand, which is Mae Sot, where the clinic is based. And we raised another 150,000 Singapore dollars to help this clinic out. They are called a clinic, but they function more like a hospital with 25 buildings and 300 staff. And of course, they have many partner organizations over the last 35 years of their existence. So it's really more of helping the entire community here in Maytao that I've been doing personally over the last couple of years. And then, of course, 1 hour later, after I arrived, right, there was the biggest earthquake in Myanmar for 100 years. So 8.3 magnitude on the Richter scale, and 4,000 over homes damaged, 40,000 people displaced. I was sort of I wouldn't say forced to go back, but I voluntarily went back to Yangon the next day. So this was another article in the local papers here in Singapore about some of the relief and recovery efforts that was immediately roped into, working with Red Cross and other NGOs and volunteer groups to coordinate the aid response. And that's also when we saw the importance of what we are really doing in Myanmar, because as we support remote employees to work for the overseas companies, that is also a vehicle for them to remain in the country. Because during a crisis like the earthquake last year, we saw that there's so much aid, but it was not very well coordinated because a lot of the educated people had already left the country. And there was a huge gap in terms of the ability to deploy the aid to the right place at the right time and to organize the groups in an efficient way. So our company was quite fortunate because we have about 100 people who have pretty good backgrounds. A lot of them have worked at Deloitte, Ernst & Young's, P&G, Unilever, large FMCG companies, and they were able to use their contacts and their skills to volunteer when a crisis like that happened. Yeah, and then the later part of the year was a little bit more of being a tour guide part-time. I don't get paid to do this. I don't have a tour license either. But I brought over 24 Singaporeans and friends from India, US, and Japan to visit Myanmar and to try out the local food, to see how Yangon, and even earlier this year, we also went with the Berkeley Alumni Club of Singapore to Shan State, hiking from Kelor to Inle. So this was the small group of us that went on the trip. And yeah, this was my latest initiative that I just started last month. So currently, Myanmar is in the monsoon season, and there are many people in rural areas that are like industrial zones. The specific area that we're working in is called Flying Thaya, which is the largest township in the whole country. And there are a lot of daily wage workers, anywhere from $2 to $4 a day. And the inflation has spiked a lot after the Iranian crisis. So the cost of living has gone up anywhere from 25 to 30% for the last 6 months, whereas their incomes have not risen. So the roof condition of many of these places are quite bad, and a lot of them are using leaves or tarpaulin mats, and it will not last through a storm. This is a short, funny video about me carrying a roof sheet. Yeah, so one of the activities that we do is to purchase, we have purchased more than 4,000 of these roof sheets already, and we intend to fix about 2,000 roofs with them. And build some rainwater harvesting systems to support the rural vulnerable communities. The progress of our fundraising currently is that we are about 75% of the way there for our second target. We have reached the full first target earlier last week. And these are the two active construction zones that we're working in, like the smaller subdivision of the township. In the Tet Tit ward, these areas have no electricity at all. And the people actually are building their homes on farmland, because a lot of these were actually slum residents that were relocated by the government a couple of years ago. So these farmlands were then subdivided into many, many small lots, and they were the only ones that were available for the very poor slum residents to afford. And then in Dine Su village, it's kind of like a bit less difficult to get to and access, but there are also like small communities that are filled with elderly residents or people with health conditions like, cholera or rheumatoid arthritis or tuberculosis and so on. And because of these conditions, they can't spend money to upkeep their homes. So when the monsoon season comes, the rain just keeps leaking into their homes, and it sort of further complicates the health issues that they are having as well. And then, of course, the rainwater collection system, it provides a clean source of water for the residents, because sometimes when they purchase the 20-liter bottles of water, that could cost them 30 to 40 cents. And that's about, 20% of their daily income for some people. So by capturing the rainwater from the roof through a gutter and a filtration system, that will save them significantly on these expenses, so that they can buy more food or use it for other essentials. And so that brings me to my formal topic of Myanmar, for people who are thinking of visiting, as well as for those who may have visited but wondering what's the current situation like. These are some of the pictures that I've taken of the country since my first trip in 2012. Back then I was a tourist, went with my classmates, and we just went to take some pictures of Yangon, Mandalay, and a lot of things have changed since then. So I'll be hopefully trying to go through a bit of all the different changes in this talk. This is the conflict map of the country, which most people will be most familiar with if you read the news or Google about the security situation in the country. I think the number one question that people ask is it safe, or can I visit? And it's a very fractured country, as you can see from the map on the left. The right side is just a zoomed in version. So the Tatmadaw, right, is the Burmese army, which is like, you can think of it as the government. And then you have like another dozen or so different groups or armed forces which control different parts of the country. So the landmass of Myanmar itself is about 1,000 times the size of Singapore. And for some context, flying from Singapore to Yangon would take about 2.5 hours. But flying from Yangon, which is here or around here, to the north of Myanmar will take about 2.5 hours as well. So the scale of this map is really enormous. And for some areas, to get from Yangon to, let's say, a conflict zone in the north, it could take you like a 35-hour drive or even longer than that. So mostly the areas which you see are controlled by the Tatmadaw currently are available for people to visit, and they are open. The airlines fly in from Singapore 4 direct flights a day, 4 to 5 direct flights a day, both directions. And I always tell people that, as long as the insurance covers it, and as long as your, Singapore Airlines, in Malaysian Airlines continue to fly there, it's probably they have done their own risk assessments. And I think we can rely on the commercial side of things to say that, those companies are not flying their planes into war zones. But at the same time, war is happening, in areas like the Shan State, in areas like the Chin State, the Arakan or Rakhine State. And these are definitely what the news media is portraying. So my aim is really to cover what the news media is not portraying as well, because there are lack of international journalists in Myanmar now. In fact, I don't believe there's even one. So sometimes they allow 1 or 2 in to observe certain occasions, but then on a prolonged basis, the citizen journalists are what the APs and CNNs of the world rely on to propagate the actual things that's going on the ground. And usually a lot of these citizen journalists have certain agendas which are well-meaning. So they might show you pictures like I did earlier, to show you about the roofing situation or the flooding situation. And they want to raise funds for, the certain needy groups of people. But that sort of skews the narrative further toward the fact that everything in Myanmar is a crisis and everything is like doomsday. So yeah, that's the context setting. And these are some of the places that I have visited personally. So the points in blue on the map, basically every state and region of Myanmar. And a lot of these are during the times before 2021 and the civil conflict started. So I count myself very blessed and fortunate to have been, talking to everyone from farmers to CEOs and learning more about the culture and what's really going on in the country. The everyday life on the street, as I mentioned, continues. This is a Mohinga shop owner opposite my old office that we used to visit. You can get a bowl of noodles for 50 cents there at that time. And then these are the regular people on the street going to the office right in the early in the morning. Yangon Airport, where you probably land if you were to come, was actually built by a subsidiary of Changi Airport Group, the one that's designed Singapore's airport. So a lot of the furnishing and the signage looks pretty similar to Singapore actually. And I believe they have been repurposed from the old Terminal 2 here. Hotels, right? So Singapore influence again, there's quite a lot of Singapore-run hotels like Sedona Hotel on the left and Pan Pacific on the right. They have been built by Keppel, and they have a lot of Singapore food and Singapore influence, like from Ya Kun Kaya Toast to the Bakwas and Food Republics and Golden Village Cinemas. So for people from Singapore, you will sort of feel like you are sort of in an extension of Singapore. Maybe if you go to the downtown areas, you'll feel like you are in a time capsule, because some of these areas look like how Singapore looked like 30, 40 years ago. And obviously the overhead cabling is very synonymous with Southeast Asia and many parts of developing world. One interesting thing that you will notice about Myanmar as well, as you can see on the picture on the right, is that the downtown areas of Yangon is the only city in the world, I believe, that has banned motorbikes. So you will see absolutely zero motorized vehicles, two-wheelers or three-wheelers, or in India, what they call auto rickshaws, because the government has outlawed them. So during peak hours, unfortunately, the traffic is not the best, but not as bad as many other places in Jakarta or Ho Chi Minh. Yeah, they drive on both the left and the right in Myanmar, because the roads switched sides when the British gave up the country and then the new governments took over. So you'll find cars with both left and right hand drive. But I believe the roads are designed for left hand drive. So just take the Grab, you'll be fine everywhere. Most of people get around without any issue with Grab. And if you really like to stay in a hotel a lot, you can just call Foodpanda, and it also works. Food wise, yeah, it's sitting in between China, India, and Thailand. So a lot of influences from the spice of Thailand to the rice and noodle dishes in China, and you can even find like biryani or thosai from Indian influence. They also have some cuisine which are a bit more local. Can't really find that in other parts of the world, like this dish called nanchitok, like a chickpea paste noodles, and then tea leaf salad, or what they call the pet tok in Myanmar. So it's always positive reviews that I get when I bring people to try out local food. But rest assured, there's lots of other Western food, Chinese food, Indian food, Thai food all around town if you're ever missing those. Yeah, something that most people didn't know is that Rangoon University, or what we call University of Yangon today, used to be the top university in Asia in the 1940s and 50s. It is also, according to Gemini, one of the top 10 oldest universities in Asia. And some of the notable graduates from this school include the founder of Myanmar's independence, General Aung San, which is the father of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, which is currently in government facility now. And the second guy over here is called U Tan. I'll talk more about him as the first UN Secretary General that was elected to 2 terms of the United Nations. And then UNU on the right is Myanmar's first Prime Minister. So they have quite a rich academic history. And some of you might also know this guy called George Orwell, who wrote 1984. He actually wrote the 1984 book when he was in Myanmar. And some say it was inspired by the authoritarian regime, and others have different theories. But there is some trivia or fun facts. This is an actual house that you can visit, which is one of the residents of this gentleman, Utan. He's one of the notable figures in Myanmar, where he negotiated the Cuban Missile Crisis, or mediated the Cuban Missile Crisis when it was the 1960s to 70s, and the Cold War was in full swing. And this is a very interesting place that looks a bit like Singapore, in Tan Lin, which is a part of Yangon. So the right side is City Loft, a project that was co-developed by Subana Jurong, one of the Singapore government-linked corporations. And then the left side is in the same compound, where it's like a condominium residence. So these are gated communities, of which there are 2 of in Yangon. And they have their own private grid, their own private hospitals, private golf courses, private pools, and a lot of other facilities, like even a farm and a solar farm and gardens. So they sort of live very independently from the rest of the city, because sometimes, like during the dry season, the electricity situation can be quite bad. The outages go on, like earlier this year, on a 4-hour rolling schedule. So that means 4 hours power, 4 hours no power. And that is because most of Myanmar's electricity, or Yangon's electricity, is generated through hydropower. So during the dry season, when there's no rain or low rains, the electricity power generation cannot keep up the demands. But thankfully, we are now in the rainy season, and during the end of the year, it will be the winter season. So blackout should be more manageable compared to the one that I illustrated. However, most of the hotels and malls that I mentioned also have backup generators. So you might not even realize that there's a blackout ongoing unless you are living in, some of the poorer areas or in your own apartment flat. Another fun fact, the last Mughal king of India was actually buried in Yangon, because he was exiled in the 1800s by the British. And Myanmar, being part of the British colony, was also the last king of Myanmar was actually buried in India. So this was like a swap that they did to post some revolution that happened in India. The king was brought to Rangoon at that time, and then eventually he passed on and was currently buried quite near to where Utan, the man I described, was buried, around Yangon Bahan area. So for those who are interested, these are also things that you can visit, and there are a lot of other fun facts in Yangon that you can discover. Yes, so that brings me to the end of the formal sharing of quick, 10-minute summary of what's going on in Myanmar. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, and yeah.
Great. Why don't I ask a couple of questions and then I'll stop recording. I know some will may not want to have their questions recorded. So, Joshua, what is this opportunity in December? I know you was mentioning in the promotion that there's skill sharing, there's opportunities to work with the local population. Can you just share at a high level what kind of skills and trainings that they're looking for?
Sure. So basically, we have a group of remote employees, as well as the larger community of entrepreneurs and other founders that are always happy to learn from people who come and visit. It can even be something that's done remotely, but of course, with the internet condition and things that are affecting the country now, a lot of people have a preference for in-person activities and events. So yeah, it would be better if someone wants to come and to spend an afternoon or a couple of hours or just 2 hours to organize a sharing session around a topic of your expertise. What I can help with is to invite some of the relevant audiences to listen. And of course, on the community side, we have different communities that we're working with. One of which is the Haing Taya area, which is about half an hour from Yangon. And we also work with a couple of schools, some of them within Yangon, some of them outside Yangon, where we are supporting them with infrastructure like solar panels or computers, scholarships for some of the students who might need to drop out because of monetary reasons. So yeah, there are lots of opportunities to try to interact with them or to coach them, or to collaborate with a school to organize some kind of a sharing session or career talk.
So the way I look at this, everyone who's watching this video or watching this live now, all of you have so many great skills, and the skills that impart over a few days of work over there to volunteer time could actually help train them to provide their services remotely in so many different capacities and bring income to themselves, their families. So that's why I'm so excited to actually help Joshua spread the word about this. To clarify, I'm not getting paid for this, nor is T, nor is Joshua. We're not charging anyone who's going to utilize these services. It's completely just sharing this knowledge, right? So I just want to make sure we clarify that.
Yeah. For some,
I guess Joshua,
for some context, some of the previous visitors that we've hosted, they have done workshops around storytelling. Ex-Business Times journalist visited and she did a workshop about storytelling. So the audience was more of the SME owners who wanted to improve their marketing game. And then we had another entrepreneur who visited and talked about his experience setting up a company, running things as a solopreneur, and being involved in all aspects of the business. In the past, we also had someone with a bit of AI background come in and do a very basic AI workshop. training people on how to do prompt engineering and things like that. So those are things that we can customize based on the interests of the community.
Joshua, the last question I'll ask is, what's the budget, right? How should someone budget in terms of flying in, let's say from Singapore? I know not everyone here is from Singapore, but to fly in, how much does it cost? Hotels, let's say a 3.5, 4-star hotel. I'm sure the food is not that expensive. What budget range should people sort of think about in Singapore dollars?
In Singapore dollars, the flights cost about $300 to $400 for a return flight. That's with Singapore Airlines or Myanmar Airlines, it's about the same price. Hotels for 2-star hotel to 3-star hotels might be anywhere from $25 to $35 a night for twin sharing. If it's a single room, then actually the price is not very different because most of these hotels don't really have single rooms, might be a bit like $5-10 cheaper. For 5-star hotels, the prices range from $55 to $80 a night, depending on like whether you need the breakfast or how many nights you're staying and things like that. So yeah, usually for a week, I don't think I've heard anyone spend more than $800. Yeah, inclusive of like accommodations and food and flights and transport.
Okay. And if you can't go in December, there's other time to go in September and October. Emails chris@xoogler.co, or you can find Joshua So on LinkedIn. He's pretty proficient in his publishing, so you can reach out to him directly as well. But I'll stop this recording now.
I'll also be there for about 3 months next year. So if anybody wants to come next year, I'll be there from like late February to May. And happy to host people, even if you're just coming one at a time.
Any last words before I stop recording, Joshua?
No, that's all.
Okay. Thank you, Joshua. And reach out to anyone who has more questions. We'd love to connect you with Joshua and the team there.